Yo! Video games.
Okay, so let's talk about what will happen today. Because we got some news stories. Now, this seemed to be piggybacking off of a now month or 2 month old video interview someone was able to do with Jenna Coleman, the voice of Melia from Xenoblade. And she sort of offhanded mentioned that, like, yeah, it was great. I was able to come back and do Definitive Edition. I heard they're working on another one, and then she's like, I don't know if I should be saying that kind of thing. And I don't want this to be like, oh, she leaked it. She didn't leak anything. All she said was that she had heard they, nebulously, were doing another one, meaning that someone, her agent or some contact within NOE or whatever, probably whatever recording house in England, had heard they were recording or making another game. She didn't say they were recording for one. All she really said is like, yeah, I heard they're making another one. That's not news. And I don't think I hope she doesn't get in any trouble for it, because, again, it's not news to say a successful video game company is going to make another video game. That's kind of nothing. But then a lot of people, and prominent people who I have said before, people who would know, came out today, and there were multiple news stories basically saying, like, hey, we saw this was trending, we just want to say, and they jumped in with what they, and basically said, yes, it's true, here's everything we've heard. So, and a lot of what these news stories really were starting with was a lot of stuff I've been saying for years. Some of it from snooping as usual, and some of it from just pure conjecture or pure just sort of guesstimation from my part. But it's things I've been fairly confident about for years now. I think Fanbite was the one that started the whole shebang, right? And then other people jumped in and said, yeah, I've heard the same thing. This is accurate. So let's just break down Fanbite's, what they reported on today. And again, the author of this article is absolutely someone I would trust on this. This is not tales out of my asshole. This is absolutely from a source that, yeah, this is, I would say is probably right. In fact, I'd even go so far as to say, would I bet money on it? Yeah, probably. So here's what Fanbite posted in their article. The third Xenoblade game is in development at Monolith Soft as a sequel to Xenoblade 2, currently the best-selling game in the series. The ending of the trilogy, not really sure where that came from, takes place in the far-flung future with a few returning characters who have long outlived their human counterparts from both Xenoblade 1 and 2. This is why Coleman, who plays Melia, would be aware of a third game, as her character is returning, and she more than likely has recorded voice acting for it. According to our sources, Xenoblade 3 was set to be revealed earlier this year, and may still be announced before the end of the calendar year, but has had a difficult time with pandemic development and optimizing the game for the Switch. The game is aiming for more character models on screen at once than any previous title, accounting for both playable characters and enemies. And then there's you can dig into the rest of the article at fanbite.com, bite with a Y, if you want to check that out. And then there was more people who chimed in with a little tiny bit more nuggets of information as well, where I'll dig in myself a little bit here. Starting from here, the information from Direct Feed Games said the information detailed and shared in this article is accurate, referring to the one I just reported. Monolith and Nintendo originally intended to announce the game several months ago, but it was held back. Current plan is to announce it this current year or fiscal year, which means anywhere between now and March, and end of March. Could slip again. It's pushing the Switch hardware to its limits, is what YoVideogames wanted clarified themselves after what they heard. And then, as a sort of addendum to all of this, someone asked about, hey, anything on an export? And to which they replied, no export is planned. Someone was like, someone said, I can pipe in and say, this is the sweet, said, I can pipe in and say that Definitive Edition happened instead of an export. No clue if one will ever happen for the Switch, which YoVideogames said was correct. Definitive Edition was chosen in favor of an export. And to which James, the sweet with 2 W's, said, yep, in fact, Monolith wanted, with asterisks, wanted to port X. Nintendo said no. And YoVideogames says, yep, and it is unlikely X will be returned to anytime soon, be it a port or a direct sequel. So, X is dead. Pour one out for the X fans. I'm sorry, little one. I tried to tell people this. I even tried to tell people this 3 years ago now. I tried to tell people 3 years ago. I was like, come on, guys. Like, going by what Monolith Soft has been hiring for, what they're planning, what everything pointed to, nothing about this seemed like they were going to port X. Not to mention, why would they port X after porting Xenoblade 1? Monolith Soft want to continue and grow, and they want to push forward. They can't just be, okay, we had a successful game, now let's just re-release everything we ever did and never go forward. So to add on to a little bit of this, I want to say, like, the only thing that's really revelatory is that in the report at Fanbite, they are claiming it's in the far-flung future, which I've been big-braining for years. Anyone who follows me on this channel knows that I have big brain. It's going to be in the future. It's going to be space-faring. It'll probably have mechs. I said it'll either be the distant future. People ask all the time. It's going to be the distant future of the world of 2, I said, or it'll be a brand new universe and it'll connect in somehow at the end. According to Fanbite, yeah, I was right on the money there, assuming the things that Fanbite is saying. Now, well, I'll get to that later. Other info. But, again, if you're like me and sort of, like, follow everything that's been going on, this doesn't really come as a super shock. A year ago, on the 21st of May, there was a Famitsu article that was translated. So Famitsu did an interview with Tetsuya Takahashi of Monolith Soft and asked, when did development on Definitive Edition begin? I remember we launched the project near the end of 2017, immediately following the release of Xenoblade 2. At the time, development of Torna was in progress, so production on both projects, and I don't know what he's talking about, like in Xenoblade Torna, but was simultaneous. A planning document was created while Xenoblade 2's DLC was being produced, and was completed around May 2018. So, planning document, pre-production of the game happened around May 2018. We officially started development in August 2018 after development of Torna wrapped up. That's when Definitive started production, in August 2018, after development of Torna wrapped up. I think in that sense it can be said that both projects had been progressing alongside each other, but staff was divided 3 ways. Staff working on a new title, staff for Xenoblade Definitive Edition, and staff working on both. So, a new title has been in development for the Switch since August 2018. And development on Definitive Edition, just so you know, wrapped around roughly February 2020. So it took pretty much a year and a half. They spent about 18 months of solid full development on Definitive Edition. That's how long it took them to make that game. If you want to get a little timeline stuff going here. Now, one thing I did sort of also find a little bit weird was the wording, and it might just be semantics. I don't have any, I mean, other than Twitter, I don't have any real contact with the authors, Imrim or Direct Feed Gaming, although Direct Feed Gaming did. I kind of backed them up, where someone tried to basically shut down Direct Feed Gaming, saying, like, they said that there was going to be a Switch Pro, and there wasn't a Switch Pro, and I'm like, you don't understand. There absolutely is kits out there for a Switch hardware upgrade, different model, and it was happening, and there are things that I cannot say that I absolutely knew about that aren't happening, or I don't know what the status of them is, but this thing was real. And why didn't it happen? Hey, what's up, Forever? Is because the industry behind the scenes is exceptionally fluid. Things are talked about, things are proposed, things are even worked on all the time. That never happened, and some of the crossovers, the combinations, the buyouts, the mergers, the things people propose to each other would honestly blow your fucking mind. All the dream team shit in the world you've ever imagined happening has been proposed. It has been talked about. You know, communications were established at some point, probably, to make say, hey, we're thinking of this, what do you think of that? And then they come back and they think about it and they go, no. And that's usually what happens, is somewhere along the way, someone says no. Someone high enough, someone big enough says no to an idea that doesn't happen. So there's an insane amount of stuff. Like Phil Spencer said in one of these interviews, or E3, or not E3s, but like one of these Inside Xbox things, where he was like, we are talking to people all the time. Now, a lot of people kind of take that, and it's fine to take it this way, but a lot of people take it as, that was just a throwaway line to say, we're always talking. No, he fucking really is. He really, truly is. Microsoft is talking to Japanese developers all the goddamn time. Not a lot comes out from it, for obvious reasons, but, like, this shit just doesn't go through. Yeah, the industry is constantly in flux. So it's surprising that they decided to go ahead and, okay, we have all these OLED screens from Samsung, let's just slap them on pre-existing Switch hardware. It's weird that they decided to take components that were supposed to be for an upgrade model and just said, alright, well, I guess fuck the upgrade, we'll just slap it on a new model and just kind of like sell it like that. But yeah, industry's in flux all the time. So before I get into lore, because I'm going to try to keep shit lore separate from this, but here's our timeline, right? Xenoblade 2 comes out December 2017. It was actually done October-ish, from what I understand. So Xenoblade 2 is done right around near the end of 2017. They start doing pre-planning on a new game in Definitive Edition. Apparently, as we are hearing from today, they actually proposed porting X, and Nintendo was like, no. Now, I think the reason Nintendo said no was probably just because X sold really poorly, because it was on the Wii U. Now, I understand, it's not the game's fault, it was the Wii U, but they knew, obviously, because they're making the dang games, but they knew that 2 was going to connect with 1. Now, Takahashi was at E3 2017, and he was like, oh, no, there's no real connection. You'll see some, like, gameplay similarities and some enemy similarities, but otherwise they're completely separate universes, and it's like, there's no connection to Xenoblade 1. You fucking liar. Wonderful, but that's a good lie. So he knew 2 was connecting to 1, and so I think for them, when it was, like, time to do this project, this, what I would call an interim project, you could have gone Definitive Edition on that, or you could try to port X. But there's so much that I have gone into detail about why X would be a nightmare to port, because so much of the game is designed around a split UI on this ugly, dirty-ass fucking thing that is so integral to the core gameplay experience. Now, I'm not saying they couldn't find a way to change it. Obviously, they could, but like, there's all kinds of network features that do not work anymore because Nintendo has a different online infrastructure than they used to. So that's a thing. You know, there's just many reasons why X was going to be a nightmare to port to the Switch. So I think they made the right call, and also like, and from a sort of lore connection reason, I see why they did it. I see why that happened. And again, this was supposed to be an interim game because I think Monolith Soft truly, I think the original plan before the apocalypse was like 2017 we had Xenoblade 2 come out, and then 2018 we had Torna come out, and then they didn't have anything in 2019, not really. So, but that just didn't happen because of apocalypse. So really, I think it turned out okay in the end because it's like, okay, so 2020 you had Xenoblade Definitive, 2022 you have Xenoblade 3. There was other things that some people were sort of trying to dig up as far as production goes. On February 27th, there was a post some people had found out. This is all the music-related stuff where Procyon Studios, who did the music for Xenoblade 2, said they were doing a large-scale production of a large product in the coming months. They posted an image of their office filled with music sheets. What's up, Brosencephalon? Saving the lore stuff? Well, I'm trying to. Anyways, and then that sort of followed suit because then they followed up on that, and there was a bunch of different posts and stuff talking about working with the Tokyo Philharmonic in March and April. Actually, it was more April. And then they did it again last week. And then apparently there'll be like one last recording with the symphony in October. We have no idea what that's for. We do know it's for a video game. We know that because of a Facebook post from the choir in Bratislava. So we know that happened. But we don't know. We still really have no idea if this is related to this game or not. No one's saying it is. In fact, the author of the Fanbite article had said that to his knowledge, Ace was doing the music, which to me makes sense because Ace has been involved in Xenoblade 1 and 2, and they did a lot of the majority of the tracks, a lot of the field themes, a lot of the town themes. I assume production's going the same way, where Mitsuda will do some of the, maybe a couple town themes, a lot of the cutscene themes, and then Ace is composing a lot of the music for the actual main game, like the battle themes, the field themes, a lot of the other town themes. That's all probably mostly going to be done by Ace, and Mitsuda will convert it into orchestrations and then get an orchestra to play it. So I'm assuming that's all kind of there. Now you can. Today I recorded. This was on March 25th. Today I recorded a different project from the one I recorded the other day. He's referring to the anime, vampire anime he composed for that's very jazzy. Since most of the songs are dark, sad, hopeful, and spiritual, as he's describing the music for this project, this giant game project, I chose Bosendorfer for the piano. He's talking about the piano brand. For the piano, and asked Akio Noguchi to play. Even if the piano is the same, the tone changes completely depending on the person who plays it. In this sense, as I have been saying all this time, if you are a professional, you need to have a firm grasp of whose performance is best suited to your music. In this sense, the sound played by Akio, the pianist, was indispensable for this piece, and I was really glad that it was Akio. The recording process is still going on, but I am already convinced that it will be a wonderful work. So, whatever this major game project was that they're doing for we don't know what or anything, the most of the songs are dark, sad, hopeful, and spiritual. Again, it really seems to be pointing towards one thing, but don't know. Again, it's all conjecture. So that's what we know about the timeline. We know it started pre-planning in August, or I'm sorry, May. Kickstarted and went into full gear in August and has been going on since. I I think one thing that kind of gets lost, or at least one thing I want to like bring up a little bit, is if you do go to Monolith Soft's website and you're okay with perusing around with like Google Translate or just straight up in Japanese, you'll find that I think it was January of this year, on the 7th of January in 2021, they did an interview with the project managers at Monolith Soft. And now these are the people who, for all intents and purposes, they cracked the whip. You know, they have to make sure shit's getting done. But going by, you know, what's written here, it really did not sound like it was that bad. I mean, yes, things obviously slowed down when they transitioned to more work from home during, you know, especially last year and probably even moving into this year too. So, I mean, I would say COVID slowed the production of this game, but I don't think this was a project. To my mind, I can't imagine this project from what especially if you go by these interviews they did. Now they are on their website, so it is obviously coming from a sort of biased source. But if you go by what they're saying in these sort of little Awada Ask style interviews on their own website, it doesn't sound like things were bad, like or like, oh, my job is so tough now. Things, it doesn't sound like things have really gone that poorly. I mean, they do talk about the fact that it's a little different now because meetings are Zoomed if they happen, and it's not the same as just walking down a hall or getting everyone from one floor to go meet up on this floor, obviously. So, I that's one part of the article where I'm like, I don't know that this is necessarily a trouble to production, but it definitely got slowed because of COVID. That's fine. It's kind of expected, honestly. Even companies for games where it's like they're more easily able to transition from work from home. Like you look at something like Final Fantasy 14, and development hit like a 3-month bump because of how quickly they were able to transition to being a more work from home style company. Probably because they're more used to having to do shit on call. Good for them. Now, as far as lore stuff goes, obviously the last thing Monolith Soft released, being Future Connected, last year, a year ago. Where does the series go from here? Well, let's assume. What's up, Al? Now let's assume the article reporting from Fanbite was 100% accurate. Everything about it, including the lore stuff, was accurate. In the art book, the official Nintendo One provided for the special edition of the game, there is a foreword from Tetsuya Takahashi of Monolith Soft. When it comes to new elements, I'm just going to read from the last paragraph here. The biggest addition is a region not finished in time for the original game, the Bionis's Shoulder, which sets the stage for the game's new story scenario, Future Connected. Much like Torna, the Golden Country, added to the main game of Xenoblade 2, Future Connected focuses on the character and story of Melia after the events of the main scenario come to a close. Why Melia and not Fiora, Rhine, Dunban, Charlotte, or Ricky, you might ask? Well, that's because this scenario isn't simply a new story to be told, but a waystone of sorts pointing toward the future. The events that take place and the words spoken by the characters in Future Connected are linked to the future of Xenoblade itself. It's our hope at Monolith that, as you experience this new scenario, you'll enjoy dreaming of what sort of future that might be. To all of you who have been with us since the Xenoblade series began, and to those of you starting your journey with us now, we hope the possibilities for the future of Xenoblade inspire you as you play. Right. So what's going on? Obviously, you know, he was. That means that you probably want to pay close attention to Xenoblade Definitive, Future Connected stuff. However, if you play the game, you probably might notice that. I don't know what you might be a little bit like, what's he talking about? And really, if you kind of have to read between the lines here, but as is old adage, Future Connect really seems to hint towards moving the Xenoblade series into some of the thematic elements of the Xenosaga series. In Future Connected, you have these creatures called fog beasts, which they can't seem to be hurt physically by, you know, normal sword swings or anything. And then Shulk has to develop this thing for his sword to basically, what in essence is using the Hilbert effect to make the unphysical physical, and so you can attack them and fight them. It basically, they act very much like Gnosis, and it's not really addressed because Shulk wouldn't have any sort of context to really comment on that, being a character in an original world and all that jazz. So it's really more for the people who've been with Monolith from the beginning, from Gears, especially from Saga all the way up to now. So it's really something that you'd have to like really dig deep into. It's not something that's like very obvious, like, oh, you know, they don't tease like the arrival of Shao Kahn is imminent. He's going to come to Earthrealm. Be prepared. Dun dun dun. To be continued. They don't do anything like that. They just sort of tease something, a possibility that if you pay close attention, this really looks and feels like the Gnosis enemies from Xenosaga, and seems to have like the same way of defeating them and stuff like that. So, so there's that. Now, there's another interesting interview from last year with Takahashi with a different outlet, VG247, who asked, Xenoblade as a series has 3 different entries now, each with a fairly different style and tone. So, what would you say the defining characteristics are of a Xenoblade game to you? What makes Xenoblade Xenoblade? Further, when you dip into Saga and Gears, what makes it a Xeno game? And Tetsuya Takahashi's response was, the stories and characters that appear in the Xenoblade series vary with each entry, but the same concept is shared among them all. It is players immersing themselves in the game world and freely walking around and adventuring in it. Thank you, God. Maybe it would have been better to rephrase and say that the concept is to get players to want to remain in the game world. We've kept this concept unchanged since Xenogears, although the Xenosaga series might be the only one of those series that doesn't follow that concept, you think? So, going further, on this topic, there's some curious small game connecting changes in Definitive Edition, like Alvis's necklace being changed to a reference to Xenoblade 2. Is your intent behind changes like this just a nod and a wink to fans, or are these attempts to more deeply and more obviously connect the universes of the games? Do you want to draw these universes closer together? From the beginning, each entry, this is Takahashi speaking, each entry in the Xenoblade series has depicted a single episode within the flow of a larger time and space, so they are, at their roots, closely connected with each other, but we're flexible with changing the means and ways in which we depict this in each entry. Xenoblade 1 and 2 are like two sides of the same coin, which might be why it feels like the connection between them seems to be particularly standing out. You think? What's up, Nappa? So, right there, it kind of like lays it all out, puts it right there, like, yes, this is a connected universe. They are all episodes taking place in a larger time and space. This is his little MCU he's building. Since obviously that's probably going to be the easiest thing for you people to connect it to at this point. Now, with knowing that in mind, we can actually look back at some of the stuff, especially in Xenoblade 2. If we take it at face value that Xenoblade 3 will be in the far-flung future Xenoblade 2, there's some things within there that we can sort of gauge what's going on, because apparently some characters, non-human, as specified as non-human characters, will be returning. Now, as far as like who could that be now? I think Pyra and Mithra are the obvious ones. However, it's weird to me because blades, and especially the Aegises, are technically powered by ether, which is powered by the conduit itself. When there is no more conduit at the end of Xenoblade 2. So I'm not really sure how or what is powering them anymore. I guess that's probably a good thing to discover in the next game. Melia's 88 and 89 in Xenoblade Definitive Edition, and her dad is 320. So this is where I think it gets a little iffy, where it's like, oh, Melia's going to return in the next game. How far-flung is far-flung? You know, when they say that, because it's like, if you're talking a couple hundred years, that's really not that far-flung for Xeno anything. Torna is 500 years before the main game, and like an old Melia would be 350 to 400 years old to be an old Melia, and she's already 88, 89, so it's like a couple hundred years after Xenoblade 2, to me doesn't really feel like, oh, so far in the future. That to me is just kind of like, oh, that's skipping a few generations. I personally, and what I've been saying is it's going to be thousands of years. It's going to be like a couple thousand, 4,000 years or something. Like something dumb like that. Like really far in the future. And given that, like, I guess Pyramithra could possibly be alive. Poppy could be alive. All the other Blades would have no memory of anyone in Xenoblade 2 if they were still alive and not Titans at that point. We don't really know what the status of the world looks like after the end of 2, because all the currently existing Titans form with the land, the original Earth at the end of that. I guess Fiora could possibly be alive at the end of in theoretical Xenoblade 3,000 of years later, assuming she didn't regrow a biological body that they sort of tease at in the first game. So yeah, I mean, Shulk would be dead, Rex would be dead, Zeke would be dead, Toro would be dead. No real great loss there. So, yeah, it wouldn't be like a big crossover Xeno Warriors style sequel where like Shulk and Rex are gonna team up with all their friends. I'm like, well, if it's supposed to be far flung, they should all be dead. Yeah, so they did tease about Fiora was gonna like regrow like another body to go into. So it's like she'd probably be dead. However, Fiora is still technically the host body for Galea, although Galea's technically dead by that point in the story, so so is it going to have British voices? Excellent question. Probably yes, considering Jenna Coleman. We go back all the way back to Jenna Coleman's role on this. Maybe yes, because if she heard they're making another one, again, I'm assuming that's either through her talent agency or the recording studio people she knows, which would be in England, which would mean, okay, they're doing a British dub again. I think it's kind of standard for the series at this point. I don't see why they wouldn't do it. Well, yes, we do. So, wrapping it all up, I have a hard time imagining that we'll actually see much of the original cast in Xenoblade 3. If it does go along with everything I've predicted, which was to be way in the future from the end of Xenoblade 2 to like a space-faring adventure at that point. I think it would be a similar situation to Klaus. You probably won't see Pyramithra would either be in a situation like Klaus, where you don't really see him until the very end of the game, or possibly in a situation like a Malthus, where they're just sort of a high-ranking deity, priest, whatever. They're kind of living their own life as like this whatever high-ranking boss somewhere in some aspect of the world, but they're not part of the main story. They're not the main character. They're not going to be traveling around with you, if that makes sense. That would be my guess, assuming they are. But I personally don't. I don't foresee personally. I'm like, I don't think they're going to be a lot of. I don't think you're going to see a lot of use or anything of the original casts at all. Like, unless it would just be very weird. It would just be weird if they did. Like, oh, we're going to bring Melia back and some Machina characters back, and Pyre and Mithra will be back. But like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think so. My gut reaction has always been, you won't really see it. You'll get some hint about them at the very end of the game, or the other possibility, the more an interesting theory, if you will, is that, and this is terrible, but it's possible, Pyramithra, Alvis, someone, well, obviously not Malice, might be recreating Rex or Shulk over time. In fact, a very, very likely scenario that could play out in a Xenoblade theoretically is that either Alvis or Pyra and Mithra have some connection to the conduit, because again, they're powered by the conduit, and they keep reincarnating either Shulk or Rex or both, because they need him. And I would lean more towards Shulk than Rex because of who he is and everything. And they need him to set free something in the conduit. Like, they keep recreating Shulk, because Shulk is the one who started the phase transition experiment originally. So he keeps getting reincarnated because they need him to set the conduit free in some way. Now, if you're asking me, like, why, like, you know, what am I talking about? Yes, we're totally going Xenogears here. That would be the only way I could see this being a sort of working in that sense. Where they... Maybe Pyramithra is doing it for selfish reasons. Which would make sense. Would actually make a lot of sense if Pyramithra keep reincarnating Rex over and over because they can't let go. Or maybe Alvis keeps reincarnating Shulk because he needs Shulk to, like, do something. Either keep the universe stable or do something to, like, free something within the conduit. So, and how that would all tie in together, I'm like, well, then you finally, if, per se, that is where the story goes, it is about basically like some loop where the main character... And the thing is, it may not even look or sound necessarily. He may not even have the same voice. He may just have, like, slight visual similarities, but not 100% similar. Or they keep bringing... This character keeps living these different lives over and over and over again in this endless cycle. It'd be bringing the story of Xenoblade full circle back to the starting point. To make it Xenogears. Again. Like, if anything, it could be something where it's like, it's similar but not 100%, where the game takes place on a new planet, not Earth, and you have this whole backstory that you find out, because there'll be this whole richly developed narrative of countries and nations at war with each other and continents and yada yada, and then you find out your main protagonist is somehow related to the original Klaus, who somehow was, who is related to Shulk, who in some way you ended up on this other planet because of a giant colony spaceship that crashed, and they even tie it to X a little bit in that sense. And then, like, the whole plot of the game is basically to, like, find some way to free the the conduit. And then, like, you have your Shulk Fong Wong. Instead of Fei Fong Wong, it'll be Shulk Fong Wong. Or it'll be, like, something like that. I can see that happening. You may not even realize it's Shulk until way later in, but it's like, it just turns into this thing where, like, Shulk is able. And it's in the far-flung future of Xenoblade 2 or something like that. Or it's either Rex or Shulk or something like that. Maybe Rex and here's another thing. Maybe Rex and Pyra go out into space looking for the conduit. Like, maybe Pyra needs to find it to stay alive, because, like, her energy's running out. And then they go looking for the conduit, and then they find it, and then you have something that happens like Xenosaga. Something like that, and that triggers an event which causes either a repeat of Xenosaga 1 or a Xenogears. This is what I think is the only possibility, the only way I would humor the idea of there being returning characters, and the returning characters have anything more than, oh, cool, it's this character, I remember that. Anything beyond I know what that is moment, where they're just kind of like hanging out in the background. Anything beyond that, the only way I can foresee something like that happening is if they do what I just said, which is there's some sort of reason Alvis or Pyra keeps reincarnating one of the original protagonists, and they need them to either stop something or free something or do something that's related to the conduit, and it involves space travel. Because I think we're just going to space travel. As long as we do not bring in Jesus fucking Christ or Mary fucking Magdalene, as long as that doesn't end up in the game, I'll be okay. So yeah, that's what I think is going to happen, and I'm going to stick to it. And hopefully within a month, we'll actually get a Nintendo Direct and get a trailer, and we'll actually get to see this all happen. So I'm hopeful. It's not going to be the end of the world if it doesn't happen, but, like, again, I trust the people writing these articles and saying these things. A lot of it is just stuff I've either come to my own conclusion or just speculated in general about, like, oh, I assume this from the interviews, from the timeline, from the amount of people that Monolith Soft has hired over the years, over the last 3-4 years, how much they've expanded, how much they've grown. You put it, like, putting it all together, I'm like, obviously they're going to make another Xenoblade. Xenoblade 2 is their best-selling game as a company ever. Obviously they want to capitalize on that. So it just makes sense to me. Like, obviously it was going to happen, but, like, now it starts to feel like everyone's coming together and saying, like, it's nearly done. It was supposed to already have been shown off, but COVID. And I think I'm putting all that stuff together. I think we have found to me, what seems like a very, while not a window, but a pretty good image, a pretty good police sketch, if you will, about what's going on with the company, with the franchise, and hopefully within a month we'll get our first little glimpse into that new world, or worlds. And I think, yeah, I'm excited to see what Monolith Soft can do. And then this many years into the Switch's life, and see how far they can push that poor ass little system. The Mythbusters rate this as plausible. Very much so. So I think that's what's I think it's happening, and I hope to see it next month.